If you had told me a year ago that spending a week at my in-laws' lake house would change everything I thought I knew about myself, I would have laughed and politely changed the subject. But here I am now, standing on the dock as the sun dips, low across the water, heart rattling in my chest like it's trying to tell me something I'm still not ready to hear. It started with an invitation. My husband Randy couldn't make the annual family getaway this year. Something about a last-minute client crisis and too many missed calls. But his father, Daniel, insisted I come anyway. "The lake's already calling," he said over the phone, his voice warm, steady. "Don't make me sit on the porch alone all week." He laughed. And then softer. "It would mean a lot." I said yes because it felt polite. Because I liked Daniel. Maybe a little too much. I'd always chalked that up to admiration. Daniel is the kind of man who walks into a room and makes it feel like it matters. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the calm confidence of someone who builds things with his hands and means what he says. He's in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, with silver starting to streak through his beard and at his temples, giving him the kind of look that turns heads, even if he doesn't seem to notice. He built the lake house himself, years ago, before Randy and I even met. A 2-story cabin, tucked into the trees, all warm wood and floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of place that smells like pine and old books, and faintly, always of him. Cedar and smoke and something that makes my stomach turn in a way I don't want to name. Now it's just the two of us for the next 6 days. I brought a stack of books I won't read, a swimsuit I won't wear, and enough awkward silence to last a lifetime. But Daniel has this way of making things feel easy. From the moment I arrived, he greeted me with a smile, clapped a hand on my shoulder, and told me to make myself at home. I did my best to smile back, to ignore how my skin buzzed where his fingers had been. And yet, something about this trip feels different. Maybe it's the quiet. Maybe it's the fact that we're here without Randy. No buffer, no expectations. Or maybe it's the way Daniel looked at me during dinner tonight, candlelight flickering in his eyes, like he was seeing something I wasn't ready to show. Whatever it is, it's beginning, and I don't think I can stop it. Daniel and I had always gotten along, even before I married Randy. In fact, it was during those early family gatherings that I found myself drawn to him. His ease with people, the way he remembered, small things I'd said weeks before. I used to tell myself that it was just because he made me feel welcome, seen. That I craved a father figure maybe, after growing up with a dad who barely looked up from his newspaper. But now, being here alone with him, I wonder if I'd been lying to myself. "You still drink your coffee black with too much sugar?" he called from the kitchen this morning, already halfway through making breakfast. I laughed, rubbing sleep from my eyes as I shuffled in. "Guilty. And you still make the best eggs this side of the Mississippi?" He gave me that slow, knowing grin. "Better even. I've been practicing. That's how it always was between us. Easy, light, like the world outside didn't matter for a while. Over the years, we'd developed this quiet rhythm, texting each other pictures of new recipes, recommending obscure indie films we knew Randy I wouldn't sit through, even calling once or twice just to talk when Randy was too busy or distracted to notice I needed someone. He never crossed a line. Not once. But sometimes, I caught him looking at me a second too long, like he was trying to memorize something. I'd look away quickly, pretending I hadn't noticed. The third night in, the weather turned. Thick clouds rolled over the lake and opened up into a cold, steady downpour. We'd been sitting on the porch, sipping bourbon and watching the water, when the sky cracked open with thunder. "Well," Daniel muttered, standing abruptly, "looks like your guest room's in trouble." Apparently the window had been cracked open all day. Rain had poured in, soaking the bedding and leaving a dark puddle on the hardwood floor. We stood there, both of us dripping, staring at the mess like it had personally wronged us. "I'll sleep on the couch," I offered quickly. He shook his head. "That thing's a torture device." "Nah, you'll take my bed. I'll take the floor." "You're not sleeping on the floor, Daniel." He gave me a look, firm but amused. "You're my guest. End of story." "Then let me sleep in the bed with you," I blurted before I could stop myself. My voice caught. "I mean, if you're okay with it, just sleep. I promise I don't snore." Something shifted in the air between us. Not dramatic, just a pause. A beat where I swear I could hear both our hearts thudding. "All right," he said softly after a moment. "Just sleep." The bedroom was warmer than I remembered. The storm outside made the room feel closer, like the walls were leaning in. We both lay stiffly on opposite sides of the bed, awkward in a way that made me feel 15 again. I stared at the ceiling, counting the slow, careful rise and fall of his breathing beside me. "You cold?" he asked after a while, his voice low, rough with sleep. "No. Just—" I hesitated. Nervous, maybe. He didn't ask why. He just let the silence fill the space again. And then, barely a touch, his hand brushed mine under the covers. I froze. He didn't pull away. I told myself it was nothing. Just a coincidence. But my heart didn't believe it. In the morning, we didn't talk about it. He made pancakes and hummed along to the radio. I helped wash dishes and pretended I wasn't watching the way the morning light kissed the lines on his face. And when he looked at me over his coffee mug, something warm bloomed in my chest. It had always been there, that unspoken thing, but now, I couldn't pretend not to feel it. The next day, the power went out. It wasn't entirely unexpected. Daniel had warned me earlier in the week that storms sometimes knocked down lines out here. But when the lights flickered twice and then everything fell into silence, I couldn't help the anxious flutter in my chest. "Well," Daniel said, holding a flashlight up to his face with a mock spooky expression. "Looks like we're camping indoors tonight." I gave a tight laugh. "You sure there's no backup generator hiding in the shed or something?" He shook his head. "Nope. Just candles, matches, and whatever survival instincts you brought with you." We spent the afternoon stacking firewood inside and digging through drawers for old board games and extra blankets. By sunset, the house was glowing in the soft flicker of candles and firelight, shadows dancing along the wooden walls. It was cozy, intimate, even romantic, though I didn't dare say that out loud. Dinner was a cobbled-together affair. Cold sandwiches, chips, and a bottle of red wine Daniel had been saving for something special. We ate cross-legged on the living room rug surrounded by blankets, the fire crackling quietly between us. "You always this calm during blackouts?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light, even though I could feel every heartbeat in my throat. He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes catching the light. "I'm calm when I'm around people who make me feel safe." I swallowed hard. That's a nice thing to say. I meant it. Silence stretched again. The kind that wasn't empty, but full of everything we weren't saying. By nightfall, the temperature dropped. We layered up in hoodies and socks, but the chill crept in like fog under the doors. "I've got extra blankets," Daniel offered. "But if it gets too cold, we might need to share body heat." I knew he was half joking. That's how he deflected. Humor just shy of suggestion. But the thought of being that close to him again, without the pretense of a storm-soaked bed, made something coil in my stomach. The wind howled against the windows as we settled in front of the fire, the two of us side by side on the couch, wrapped in the same thick wool blanket. Our legs touched, just barely, but it was enough. "Do you miss him?" Daniel asked quietly. It took me a second to realize he meant Randy. I hesitated. "I do. But I also think I've been lonely for longer than I've let myself admit." He didn't respond right away. His gaze stayed fixed on the flames. "You deserve to be seen. Not just tolerated. Not just put on hold." Those words hit harder than I expected. My chest tightened. I glanced at him, studied the line of his jaw, the way the firelight danced across his skin. My hand, resting between us, twitched slightly. I thought about reaching for him, about letting the ache I'd been carrying take shape. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. "I'm scared," I said instead, barely above a whisper. "Of what this means, of what I'm feeling." Daniel turned to look at me. His expression was unreadable at first. Serious, thoughtful, then soft. "I know," he said. "But feelings don't go away just because we're afraid of them." His hand brushed against mine again, not quite holding it, just resting there, his pinky grazing my skin. And this time, neither of us moved. We sat like that for what felt like forever. The blanket cocooned us, our shoulders pressed together. His warmth was undeniable, and I could feel every slight shift of his breath, every subtle movement as he adjusted, his thigh pressed along mine. It should have felt wrong. I was married to his son. We weren't supposed to be here like this, hovering on the edge of something unspoken. But nothing about it felt wrong. It felt inevitable. At one point, I leaned my head back against the couch, and he did the same. Our cheeks nearly touched. "I always thought you were special," he said softly. I didn't answer. I didn't know how. The words melted into me, hot and dangerous and honest. Later, when the fire began to die down and we finally stretched out on the couch, still wrapped in the same blanket, I felt his hand graze my waist as he shifted closer. The couch wasn't wide enough to keep space between us, and soon, I could feel the rhythm of his breathing against my back. "Good night," he murmured, his voice low, right by my ear. I closed my eyes. Good night. But sleep didn't come. Not for a long time. My mind replayed everything. His words, his touch, the way he'd looked at me like he saw through all my walls. I was afraid of where this was going. Afraid of what I might do if he kept being so gentle, so close, so himself. But deeper than the fear was the hope that he might feel it too. And maybe, just maybe, he did. The power was still out the next morning. The house was quiet, hushed by the kind of calm that comes after a storm. I woke up tangled in a blanket, still on the couch, still warm from where Daniel's body had been pressed close to mine, but he wasn't there now. For a few minutes, I just lay there, blinking at the ceiling, trying to breathe evenly. I could still feel him, his warmth, his presence, the gravity of him. Everything between us had been inching forward for days now. Every glance, every almost touch. And I didn't know how much longer I could hold it all in without coming undone. I found him in the kitchen, making coffee on the gas stove like it was any other day. He wore an old gray hoodie and pajama pants, barefoot, his hair a little mussed. "Morning," he said with a soft smile. "You sleep okay?" I nodded. "Yeah. You?" He shrugged. "Could have been worse. You kick in your sleep." I smiled, faintly, but the air between us wasn't light. It hadn't been since the night before. There was too much unsaid hanging between us now. And I couldn't pretend it wasn't there anymore. Not after how he'd looked at me in the firelight. Not after the way I'd caught myself wanting to roll over in the night, just to be closer to him. "You going to keep pretending none of this is happening?" I asked before I could stop myself. Daniel froze. He didn't turn around, didn't say anything right away. Just stared down at the coffee as it began to boil. Finally, he said, "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean," I said, a little more quietly. "This, the way you touch me like it means something. The way you talk to me like you're trying not to say what you actually want to." He turned then, slowly, and leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. There was a war in his eyes. One part caution, the other longing. "I can't want this," he said after a pause. "Not with you." My chest tightened. "Why not?" "Because you're Randy's husband." I looked down. My fingers curled around the hem of my sweater, gripping tightly. "We're separated," I said. "You know that. He hasn't called in weeks. He doesn't care where I am, Daniel. You know it." He looked at me like he wished that wasn't true. "But I do care," he said, and his voice cracked a little. "That's the problem." I took a breath, stepped closer. "Then stop pretending you don't." His gaze dropped to the floor. "I'm not pretending." "Yes, you are. You've been pretending since the day we met. Every time you smiled at me like it was harmless. Every time you remembered the smallest thing I said, or made me feel like I mattered more than just your son's husband." He looked up again, his eyes sharp, but not angry. just exposed. Do you know how many nights I've sat here hating myself for thinking about you the way I do? I swallowed hard. Then maybe stop hating it. Daniel let out a long, shuddering breath and ran a hand through his hair. You have no idea how many times I told myself to let it go, that you'd never see me that way, that if I did something, if I acted on it, I'd lose you completely. I stepped in, closer than I had any right to be. My voice dropped to a whisper. But what if you wouldn't? He looked at me, eyes searching mine like he needed to find something solid, something real in all this confusion. I could see the vulnerability written across his face. He wasn't playing it cool anymore. He wasn't hiding. You feel it too, don't you? I asked. His voice barely made it past his lips. Yeah, I do. It felt like everything in my chest cracked open. I didn't rush the next moment. I just stood there, close enough to hear his breathing shift, to see his pupils dilate ever so slightly. My hand lifted on instinct, brushing against his forearm. He didn't flinch. He leaned into it. A silent answer. I don't want to be afraid anymore, I murmured. Of this. Of you. Daniel stared at me for a long beat. Then, slowly, tentatively, he reached up and touched my cheek. His hand was rough, warm, and trembling. I leaned into it, and then, like we'd been pulled together by something neither of us could stop, he kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't frantic. It was careful, hesitant, like a question. His lips were soft, his hand still on my cheek, and everything in me came alive all at once. I kissed him back, my hand sliding to his chest, feeling the thrum of his heartbeat. He let out a sound, half sigh, half relief, and deepened the kiss for just a moment before pulling back, his forehead resting against mine. Tell me this isn't a mistake, he whispered. I shook my head, breathless. It's not. It never was. He pulled me into his arms then, wrapping me up like he'd been waiting to do it forever. I melted into him, burying my face in his chest, breathing him in. He smelled like coffee, cedar, and something I'd always thought of as home. I know what happens next, he said against my hair. I don't know how we navigate this. We figure it out, I said. Together. He nodded, his chin brushing the top of my head. God, you have no idea how long I've wanted to say that. I think I do, I murmured, smiling into his shirt. We stood there for a long time, wrapped up in each other like we were the only two people left in the world. And in that moment, with the house quiet around us and the storm past, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. Not because everything was simple, but because, for once it was honest, and that was enough. We didn't say much for a while after the kiss, didn't need to. There was something sacred about that silence, something gentle. Daniel kept his arms around me like he was afraid I'd vanish if he let go. And I clung to him because I was still convincing myself this was real, that the man I'd been quietly aching for wasn't just holding me, but holding back. Eventually, we moved to the living room, curling up on the couch again. This time, though, there was no awkward distance, no pretending. His hand found mine, under the blanket, fingers lacing together like it was second nature. I'm still trying to believe that just happened, he said, a soft chuckle in his voice. You and me both. He turned his head to look at me. Do you regret it? I didn't hesitate. Not even for a second. He exhaled slowly, like he'd been bracing for another kind of answer. I keep thinking about what this means. For us. For Randy. I flinched slightly at the name, but I nodded. I know, it's complicated, but we don't have to figure it all out today. He smiled, squeezing my hand. You're right, God, I've wanted to kiss you for so long I almost feel stupid admitting it. I laughed. You? Stupid? No. I was the idiot, thinking I was just imagining all of it. Daniel smirked, that familiar glint of mischief in his eyes. Oh, you definitely weren't imagining it. I'm a terrible liar. Could have fooled me. You played the friendly father-in-law act very convincingly. That was me trying very hard not to stare at you every time you walked into the room. I shook my head, amused. You really had me thinking I was just some emotionally needy guy projecting feelings onto someone way out of my league. He shifted, leaning closer, brushing his nose lightly against mine. You're not out of my league, he whispered. You're exactly where I want to be. That made my chest tighten in the best way possible. We kissed again. Slower. Deeper. This time. There was no uncertainty now, just warmth and hunger, and the overwhelming comfort of being seen. When we finally pulled apart, I rested my head against his shoulder and let myself breathe for the first time in what felt like years. I want to be with you, I said quietly. I don't know how we'll make that work, but I want this. I want you. Daniel's fingers stroked gently over the back of my hand. I want that too. I've never felt this way about anyone, and I'm done pretending it doesn't mean something. The power flickered back on with a soft hum, the lights blinking to life around us. We both looked up, slightly startled, but neither of us moved. Guess that's our cue to return to the real world, I said, trying not to sound disappointed. Daniel looked at me, a slow smile forming. Or maybe it's just a reminder that we still have a world to face, together. I reached up and touched his face, thumb brushing along his jaw. You know this won't be easy. I know. But I'd rather fight for this than keep lying to myself. I nodded, heart swelling. Then we figure it out, one step at a time. He leaned in, pressing a kiss to my forehead. Starting with breakfast? I grinned. If it includes more of that coffee you made earlier, I'm in. We stood, still close, hands lingering together for just a beat longer than necessary. There was a lightness in the room now, a shift in the air. Like something broken had been gently mended. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that made all the difference. A week later, the snow had melted. The roads were cleared. And my bag was packed, but I hadn't moved it from the hallway. It just sat there, like a question I didn't know how to answer. Daniel stood beside me at the window, arms folded, watching the morning light spill across the yard. The silence between us wasn't tense, it was thoughtful. We'd spent the past few days in something like a dream. Coffee in the mornings, long walks through the woods behind the house, quiet dinners that ended with shared looks and fingers grazing beneath the table. We'd talked more in those few days than we had in years. Not just about us, about everything. His childhood. My fears, how we'd both been living lives we hadn't entirely chosen, and what it would mean to choose something, for once, that felt terrifyingly right. You're supposed to leave today, Daniel said without looking at me. Supposed to? I'd echoed. He glanced over, a slight smirk forming. Are you going to? I shrugged, but I couldn't help the way my mouth curved. I don't want to, but I know I can't stay hidden here forever. He stepped closer, gently brushing his hand against mine. You're not hiding, not anymore. I looked up at him, heart catching. So what now? He paused. Now, we stop pretending this is temporary. I blinked. What do you mean? I mean, he said, reaching into his back pocket. You left this the night of the storm. He held up a key, the spare I'd dropped when fumbling with my bag. I held onto it. Wasn't sure why, but maybe I do now. He pressed it into my hand and closed my fingers around it. You always have a place here, he said. If you want it. My throat tightened. Are you sure? Daniel nodded. I've spent too long waiting for life to make sense before. I chose what I wanted. But this? He lifted my chin gently. You? I want this. No matter how messy it gets. I couldn't speak at first, just held his gaze as that familiar warmth spread through my chest. The kind that only came when something was real. Safe. Home. I slipped the key into my pocket and leaned into him. Okay, I whispered. Then let's figure it out. His arms wrapped around me, and we just stood there, holding each other in the soft light of a new morning. Later that day, instead of leaving, I unpacked my bag. Daniel teased me about how many sweaters I owned, and I teased him back about his terrible taste in mugs. We made lunch together, bickered playfully over the right amount of garlic to use, and he let me win even though I knew he was right. At some point, while we were washing dishes, I glanced at him, his sleeves pushed up, hair still damp from a shower, humming softly under his breath. And I thought, this is it. This is what it's supposed to feel like. That night, we sat by the fire again, just like we had the night everything changed. Only this time, his head was on my shoulder, and our fingers were laced together beneath the blanket. You ever think about how weird this all is? I asked, voice low. He laughed. Every second. But, good weird. The best kind, he said. I turned to look at him. You think we'll be okay? He met my eyes and smiled in that slow, quiet way of his, the one that always made me feel safe. I think we already are. And I believed him. Because for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something we could build. Together.